Pedro Miguel Echenique, qué maravilla, cómo está el Aquarium. Esto es una maravilla, el auditorio del Aquarium, tanta juventud, esto es emocionante. El mundo va muchísimo mejor y gracias a vosotras y a vosotros, porque el estar aquí es tener ilusión, aparte del conocimiento, es que tenéis una ilusión por saber más. Vamos siempre por el valle, pero mirando siempre al firmamento, a las montañas, a conseguir lo imposible, como solemos decir eso, Pedro Miguel y yo, conseguir lo imposible, bueno, apuntar a lo imposible para conseguir lo posible. Eso es lo importante. Bueno, señores, excelentísima, ilustrísima y reverendísima, porque es buenísima de esto, mi querida Isabel, eres extraordinaria. Y no digamos de Pedro Miguel Echenique. Amigas, Ada, Yonath y Sylvia, que están por aquí. Encantado, mucho gusto. Y mi querido amigo Pedro Miguel Echenique, porque Miguel Echenique es de casa. Y gracias a él aquí están funcionando muchas cosas. Gracias a a Pedro Miguel Echenique. Sí, le consulto muchas cosas. Y los consejos siempre suelen ser excelentes. Bueno, bienvenidos a este Aquarium renovado y centenario. Y todavía estamos aquí con un músculo y con una ilusión tremenda a pesar de los 100 años. Sede de la Fundación Oceanográfica de Guipúzcoa, donde tenemos el honor de recibirles con todo respeto, admiración y afecto. Como presidente de esta institución, no puedo menos de expresarle mi profunda satisfacción por verles aquí reunidos, en la convicción de que tanta sabiduría, tanta ciencia y tanto conocimiento como el que ustedes representan se trasvasará e impregnará a estos históricos muros, para que desde nuestra modestia cumplamos con entusiasmo y rigor el empeño fundacional de quienes crearon el Aquarium, que no es otro más que la investigación del medio marino. Quiero agradecer cordialmente a mi buenísimo amigo don Pedro Miguel Echenique como director y creador del Donostia International Psyche Center, feliz responsable de que hayamos podido disfrutar de tan ilustre visita y que tenemos el privilegio de contar con su amistad y colaboración, Pedro Miguel. Confieso abrumado que ante ustedes, galardonados con el más alto honor de la ciencia, tengo la misma sensación de estar contemplando aquel cuadro magnífico que pintó en el año 1510 Rafael Sanzio, titulado La Escuela de Atenas, y está hoy expuesto en el Museo Vaticano. Allá, donde mire, veo sabios, veo reflejadas las dos filosofías de vida que representan estas dos figuras decisivas para el pensamiento occidental, que son Platón y Aristóteles. Soy un enamorado de estos dos señores. Los dos modos de ser, el idealismo y el realismo. Sin el idealismo de la vocación y el realismo del trabajo duro, ustedes no habrían llegado a alcanzar tan alto grado de conocimiento. Ustedes han hecho realidad la lección de los antiguos sabios. Si no buscamos lo imposible, jamás conseguiremos lo posible. Nos habéis honrado con vuestra visita, no solo a este Aquarium, sino a nuestra tierra, el País Vasco, en el que nuestros antepasados hicieron de la necesidad virtud, y de una historia pobre en recursos, pero rica en personas de gran mérito, vivimos un tiempo floreciente en las artes, en las ciencias y en la dinámica social. Una tierra en que brotaron navegantes cuyo espíritu aventurero y preparación profesional les hicieron ser capaces de dar la vuelta al mundo, y los primeros como Juan Sebastián Elcano. Artistas, filósofos, escritores, santos también ha dado esta tierra y buenos, y científicos han florecido en este País Vasco a través de los siglos. Y gracias a su prestigio y a su presencia histórica, podemos decir que estamos preparados para recibirles a ustedes con humildad, pero con humildad señorial que nos caracteriza a nosotros. Este Aquarium tiene el lema del vetera nobis augere, que mi tío Juan Zaragüeta, el gran filósofo, y en su modestia, está abierto a las últimas novedades tecnológicas y pedagógicas para cumplir la misión que animó a sus fundadores: permanente investigación, cuidado y respeto al medio ambiente, en este caso al medio marino, dedicación pedagógica y ocio cultural a alto nivel. Ustedes, como los personajes de la escuela de Atenas, imparten y expanden sabiduría con su propia presencia. Su ejemplo nos anima a acometer la transformación de nuestro pequeño mundo: ocio, familia, trabajo, empresa y hasta de las más rígidas estructuras sociales. Aprendemos de ustedes su impulso para renovar horizontes, proyectar tareas y traducir la ciencia en acción, con tenacidad y paciencia. Pedro Miguel Echenique, eskerrik asko por la oportunidad que nos has dado de celebrar este trascendental evento en este Aquarium, que es tu casa y la de todos ustedes, la de todas vosotras. Con relación a las preguntas que van a hacer los adolescentes, yo tengo ya muchos años y recuerdo todos aquellos concursos que solía haber hacia los años 40 y tantos, 50, total, antes de ayer. Tenían el objeto de despertar la inteligencia de los niños, adolescentes y culturizar a los mismos. Yo creo que estos concursos tenían mucho de ingenio y al mismo tiempo de humor. Y recuerdo también que el resultado fue sensacional. Las preguntas eran las siguientes. Os vais a reír, ¿eh? Las preguntas eran las siguientes. ¿Qué le dijo la cerilla al cigarrillo? Por ti pierdo la cabeza. Otra muy buena. ¿Qué le dijo el pitillo a la cerilla? Por ti me consumo. Y esto despertaba un poquitín y todos andábamos ahí, pues en ese término. Terminado el anterior, se organizó otro por el estilo, pero a base del hiperbólico tan. Y recuerdo que el resultado fue también satisfactorio, con respuestas tan extorsionadas como aquella sin duda inolvidable, a la que con ribetes de pedantería era una locomotora tan matemática, que en lugar de decir pi, decía 3, 14, 16. Bueno, y ahí estábamos. Y a un premio Nobel de literatura, con esto acabo, don Pedro Miguel, me estás mirando, tengo unas miraditas. Y a un premio Nobel de literatura le atacaban acusándole de lentitud en sus escritos y tal. Y entonces él reaccionó contestando: la rapidez es buena, todo para cazar pulgas, pero no para escribir. Y nada más, Yonath eskerrik asko eta ongi etorriak. Basarkada bat handia danentzako. Eskerrik asko. No os olvidéis de la cerilla y el cigarrillo, para soltar por ahí. Gracias.
Egunon guztioi, posten naiz zuekin egoteaz, benetan. Eta zorionak etortzagatik. I would like to express my gratitude to you, Ada Yonath and Sylvia Earle, for being here with us today. Your visit to San Sebastian is very important to all of us. It's important to me, the head of education in the Basque Country, and it's important to the students gathered in this aquarium today. Your presence puts eyes and faces to our commitment to a society of knowledge. Your life stories inspire us to aim for personal growth and to cultivate a passion for knowledge. Ours is a small country, but we are capable of the best. The excellence that we see in you motivates us to emulate you. I am certain that passion for science and knowledge is contagious. And I am sure that your presence among us in itself suggests our predisposition for daring to know. Sapere aude, Horace and Kant instructed us, and we wish to set out with you on the adventure of knowing. We want you to infect us. We want to share the adventure of knowing with you. Thank you, Ada. Thank you, Sylvia, for being here with us. And thank you, above all, for your commitment to humanity. A mis queridos alumnos y alumnas les quiero contar algo, una historia muy corta. La historia de Pablo y el calamar, ya que estamos en el Aquarium, Vicente. Conocí a Pablo hace algunos meses en una visita al SS Bilbao, a la fuente de neutrones, que como sabéis, o no sabéis, pero ahora vais a saber, está situada en el Parque de Zamudio. Pablo es un joven investigador allí y me dijo que desde el instituto él quería ser investigador. Y yo le dije, ya sabes que optas por una vida de martirio, porque ser investigador no es fácil. Todavía quedan muchos desafíos por enfrentar en la carrera de investigador. Me dijo, no me importa, quiero ser investigador. Y quiero seguir además las investigaciones de los doctores Hodgkin y Huxley. A Hodgkin y Huxley les otorgaron el premio Nobel en 1963 por sus trabajos sobre el mecanismo iónico de la generación y propagación del potencial de acción. Sus trabajos anticiparon varios fenómenos. Uno de los elementos clave para su tarea fue el axón gigante de calamar. Ya sabéis que los calamares son moluscos con 10 tentáculos y un manto muscular recorrido, inervado, por axones o prolongaciones de neuronas de gran diámetro que en algunas especies llegan a tener cerca de 1 milímetro, dimensiones enormes cuando se las compara con los de un mamífero. Cuando el animal es amenazado, y esto sí lo sabéis, vierte desde una glándula un líquido oscuro, la tinta, que contiene melanina y se aleja del estímulo por la contracción rápida de los músculos del cuerpo. Muy pronto los investigadores tomaron en cuenta que tenían en sus manos una preparación única. Se podían insertar a lo largo del axón electrodos metálicos para registro e inyección de corriente, exprimir el axoplasma, el citoplasma de esa prolongación y cambiar la composición del medio intracelular. Las neuronas del manto del calamar han sido precisamente muy importantes en la historia de las neurociencias. Gracias a ellas, la investigación neurofisiológica ha experimentado un gran desarrollo, pero no solo para la neurofisiología. Hace pocas semanas, Pablo ha leído con brillantez su tesis doctoral y la ha hecho sobre un circuito electrónico que simula esa neurona gigante del calamar. Vosotros tenéis hoy todo en vuestras manos. Tenéis una excelente formación, tenéis excelentes ejemplos en esta comunidad y, desde luego, un buen número de animales marinos para observar. Así que, gogoratu, jakintza ausardia ere badela. Norberaren mugetatik harago joateko atrebentzia. Mugak gainditzetik dator jakintza, eta jakinduriak horretarako balio du. Gizon emakumeen hortzi muga behin eta berriz gainditzeko. Gaurko gizarteak eta bertako kontsumorako joerak etsipena eragiten ditu. Eta etsipena da gizadiaren errurik okerrena. Etsipenak gure gogoa antxu bilakatzen du. Gure borondatea kamusten du. Gizonak aurrera egiteko beharrezkoa du oldartzen jakitea eta biziari ausardiaz aurre egitea. Gure aurrekoek ausartak izan zirelako asmatu zuten aurrera egiten. Ausarta izan zen Elkano, munduaren lehen itzulia burutzean. Ausarta izan zen Lope Agirrekoa, bere kimeraren atzetik joan zenean. Ausartak izan ziren gure arbasoak. Terranobako lurretara heldu zirenean. Ausartak dira Pedro Miguel Etxenike, Ada Yonath, Sylvia Earle, jakintzaren bidetik abiatu direnean. Izan zaitezte gazteak, izan zaitezte ausartak. Mila esker.
Buenos días a todos. Egun on guztioi. Este congreso es el congreso de las anécdotas. El otro día yo iba con la camiseta y la consejera nos vino de Dior. Como hoy yo he venido con mi traje y mi corbata bien preparado y me viene como que es una jovencita. Entonces corriendo a cambiarme y aquí estoy con esta camiseta. Yo quiero agradecer muy especialmente a nuestra ministra de Educación, Universidades e Investigación, Isabel Zela, no solo por estar hoy aquí, que también, sino por el apoyo continuado que ha dado al Donostia International Physics Center, es nuestro mayor patrono, pero además por su apoyo a la investigación básica, lo dije el día pasado en el cursal, y sobre todo porque está haciendo esfuerzos eficientes, inteligentes y entusiastas para permitirnos funcionar como funcionan los mejores centros del mundo, con arquitectura institucional flexible e incluso encontrar vías para tener lo que tiene Harvard y nosotros todavía no tenemos, autonomía financiera, endowment. La inauguración de este congreso, ella hizo un discurso que yo considero que va a ser, y lo quiero decir, en público, porque como sabe mi gran amigo Alberto López Basaguren, ¿por dónde está Alberto? A mí cuando quiero algo no me importa repetirme, un discurso que va a ser, yo creo, referente durante muchos años en la política de ciencia y tecnología, no solo del País Vasco, porque bien vendría que en otros entornos geográficamente cercanos se tomasen notas de las reflexiones que allí se escucharon. Pero también quiero agradecer a Tere Campos, del Departamento de Educación, que nos ha ayudado entusiastamente. Su entusiasmo es abrumador hasta el punto que, a pesar de que al acabar este congreso vamos a querer descansar durante 3 meses sin saber nada de organizar nada, pues ya está intentando convencernos de que demos un curso de nanotecnología a los profesores de instituto. Incluso a mí ya me ha convencido que dé 5 horas, pero no más. 5 horas, pero no más. En todas estas discusiones que estamos teniendo, lo que se ve es que la naturaleza siempre habla, a veces no a gritos, a veces en suspiros, pero siempre habla claro. Lo que pasa es que no estamos preparados para entenderla. No tenemos los lenguajes adecuados y eso es la investigación. Encontrar los lenguajes para intentar entender lo que la naturaleza nos dice. A veces, insisto, suavemente, con suspiros, ¿no? Pero el aprendizaje de este lenguaje, intentar encontrarlo, requiere formación. Formación que en estos momentos se encuentra con un dilema, porque el crecimiento exponencial del conocimiento hace necesaria la especialización. Pero hoy investigar en medicina es intentar conjugar medicina, biología, física, química, física, nanotecnología. Es decir, interdisciplinaridad. La propia necesidad de interdisciplinaridad es lo que la hace cada vez más difícil, que es este tremendo crecimiento del conocimiento. Y por eso lo que debemos aprender todos son el lenguaje de otros, el lenguaje de los demás, de las demás disciplinas. Sin olvidar que hoy ya el hombre del Renacimiento o la mujer del Renacimiento no es posible. A lo más que podemos aspirar es a equipos del Renacimiento, como los que han configurado todas estas personas que están aquí. Pero por otro lado, una idea siempre surge en la mente de una persona. Y esta es la labor esencial de los profesores, cuidar a estas personas. Yo creo que no se puede enseñar muchas cosas. La única cosa que un profesor puede de verdad enseñar, con su conocimiento, con su ejemplo, con sus valores, es inducir el afecto por la materia, la pasión por conocer y un respeto a unos ciertos valores. Un ejemplo de la enseñanza que yo tengo en mente es la enseñanza de Anne Sullivan a Helen Keller. Helen Keller, sordomuda, luego ciega, aprende exponencialmente. En 3 meses aprende a leer. Una vez que Anne Sullivan consiste despertar en ella la pasión por conocer. Cuando le preguntaron por su secreto, Anne Sullivan dijo: nunca le dije nada que ella no quisiese saber, ¿no? Y eso es el ejemplo de la ciencia de frontera. La ciencia de frontera, la ciencia en sus fronteras no es un conjunto congelado de dogmas. Es una aventura intelectual, una aventura humana. Y para lograrlo necesitamos, yo no soy partidario de, bueno, no creo que el secreto está en grandes metodologías, sino en tener profesores bien formados, bien motivados y bien remunerados en lo económico y sobre todo, bueno, y también en el reconocimiento de la sociedad. Si se hace así, lograremos una comunidad científica y despertar las vocaciones científicas. Pero en su brillante intervención de ayer, Sylvia Earle nos hablaba de que no es posible ciencia sin conciencia y que hay un imperativo ético para las siguientes generaciones: cuidar lo que tenemos. Cuidar lo que tenemos para que dentro de 30 años no nos digan, bueno, ya ven que yo soy un optimista, pero de 30 años no me digan por qué no hicisteis algo, ¿no? Y eso solo se puede lograr por la educación. La educación es el arma mejor que tenemos para defender nuestro presente y nuestro futuro. Hoy la ciencia, esta educación, es internacional en sus valores y no depende ni de razas, ni de origen social, ni de género, ni de nacionalidades. Y por eso hoy el lenguaje es el inglés. Y es muy importante que aprendáis bien el inglés. Que aprendáis bien el inglés, pero nosotros somos vascos. Y esa aspiración a la universalidad debe hacerse desde el respeto a la peculiaridad concreta. Yo leí una vez una dedicatoria de un libro que me encantó a mi nieta Ainhoa, para que sea capaz de vivir en un mundo sin fronteras, pero sin olvidar sus raíces. Eta horregatik nik beti esan dut, gure herrigintzak etorkizunik izango balu, hezkuntzan, berrikuntzan, teknologian eta euskaran oinarritu beharko da. Euskarak eta Euskal Herriak gaun arte iraun badute, euskaldunok aldi eta egoera berrietara egokitzen jaki dugulako izan da. Eta gure jatorrizko herria eta hizkuntza orain arte gauza izan dira, berez ginenari uko egin gabe etorkizunaren jabe egiteko. Este es para mí el camino que está siguiendo nuestro gobierno, continuando con las diferencias que son absolutamente legítimas, faltaría más, para eso hay elecciones, pero continuando este núcleo central de respeto a nuestra lengua y de cuidado y a la vez abierto a otras lenguas. Y para concluir, decir que estas cosas no se logran solo con conocimiento, hace falta comportamiento, alta pasión por conocer. Creo que era Cajal el que dijo: toda obra grande, tanto en arte como en ciencia, es el fruto de una gran pasión al servicio de una gran idea. Y hoy tenemos personas con nosotros, como Sylvia Earle y Ada Yonath, que han mostrado grandes ideas y grandes pasiones, que son modelos, ya leyendas en sus campos. Y para nosotros es un profundo honor tenerlas aquí. Thousand thanks, Ada, eta thousand thanks, Sylvia, for having accepted our invitation. Ahora empezaremos un diálogo en que ella actuaré de moderador, en que ellas hablarán un poco y lo que quieren es preguntas. Habrá una reunión informal para café, les explicarán el procedimiento. No estén asustados, ya sé que vienen asustados, pero ellas, hoy decía Campillo, nuestro secretario ejecutivo, en un artículo precioso en el Diario Vasco, que ellas son como vosotros y vosotras podéis ser como ellas si trabajáis y os ilusionáis. Cerrar los móviles para que no os pase lo que me pasó a mí en el acto inaugural, que cuando yo decía, pero ¿a quién es este capullito que le está sonando el teléfono durante la intervención de la gente? era el mío. Entonces, por favor, cerrar los teléfonos y empezamos el acto. Now they will speak for 5 minutes, telling about whatever they like, their life, and then it will be open turn of questions, a few questions. The procedure will be explained by Enrique Zarate, another of our great members of this executive committee. After, we will have coffee to stay informally with them, and we will come back for another hour of questions. So please, Sylvia, you have the floor.
Well, it's a great pleasure to be here with you, especially in the fish house, with lots of friends. I get asked quite often, how did you get to be an explorer in residence at the National Geographic? Or how did you get to be a scientist? And I say it's really easy. It's true of every scientist I know, every explorer I know. The same answer. We all start out as children. We do what children do. We ask questions. Who, what, why, where, when, how. We have the same kind of wonder that children have naturally. And then we never grow up. It's easy. It's really easy. To be a scientist, to be an explorer, you have to maintain that same sense of curiosity, or that same sense of awe that about life, about the fact that we exist, and a constant desire to want to understand, to know, to keep turning over rocks, to look around the next corner, to climb the next mountain, to dive into the next part of the ocean. At least that's how I see it. You look at any scientist, they have that same openness that I think I see in all of you. That wanting to know, what's going on here? Why am I here? Where did we come from? Where are we going? Why are we here? Maybe we'll never find out all the answers. I hope not, because then if you have answers to all the questions, there's nothing more to look for. A scientist friend of mine, you may know about this man. He's a famous explorer, a diver, a zoologist, Hans Haas. At about the same time that Jacques Cousteau began exploring the ocean, Hans Haas, who's from Austria, began exploring the Mediterranean Sea. Actually, he began even before Jacques Cousteau came along with the aqualung and other diving methods. Hans Haas shared dinner with me some years ago, and he said that he was so sad for his daughter, who was at the time about the same age as you. He said, all the big discoveries have been made. There's nothing more. I was the first to see sharks underwater. I was the first to be able to dive in the Red Sea. I was the first to take underwater photographs. None of these things can my daughter do. It's already been done. And I said, Hans Haas, how can you possibly imagine that it's all over, that it's been done, that everything has been explored? There's some people who still think that the great era of exploration is over, that we now know all about the world, and to find new things we have to go into space to seek the worlds beyond, wherever they might be. I said, you know, you may have been the first human being to dive into the Red Sea and take pictures and see sharks underwater. But every door that you opened showed that there are another 100 doors out there that have to be opened. Every question answered leads to more questions that need to be answered. This conference that we've been attending is a great example of how we're just beginning to answer some of the really big questions. Where did we come from? Why are we here? Where are we going? And for me, as a child, it seemed there were no end to the questions that I could ask. I could go to a library, and it seemed to me at the time that my job was to find out what all those books said. I had to learn what people already knew. It was a big job. I haven't finished reading all the books there are to be read. I could spend 100 lifetimes and still not read all of the books or learn about what already has been learned. But what I found impressive as a child, going out to the sea near where I lived in Florida, next to the Gulf of Mexico, that some people refer to as America's Mediterranean. It's much like the ocean that you have here at San Sebastian, along the coast of Spain, along the coast of the countries that border this Mediterranean Sea. I would find things along the beach, little crabs. I wanted to know, what's the name of this little crab? How does it live? What does it do? How does it spend its night? I can see it here in the daytime, but where does it go at night? How does it come to be a grown-up crab? How does it start out life? I mean, there are 100 questions that I could ask just looking at this one little creature. And so I went to the books. First of all, I couldn't find a name for the crab that I wanted to know. What is his name? How old is this little creature? How does it get to be here on this beach? The books couldn't tell me. Nobody knew the answers to some of the questions I could ask, even as a child. There's still so much that we don't know about the ocean. Only 5% of the ocean has been seen by anybody. Not by Hans Haas, not by Jacques Cousteau, not by me, not by anybody. We have only one excursion, one trip ever in history to the deepest part of the ocean. That is at 11 kilometers down in the Mariana Trench. Hundreds of people have been to the top of the highest place above the water, Mount Everest. Hundreds of people have stood at the top of that great mountain, but only 2 people have ever been to the deepest part of the sea. And it was before you were born, 1960, and nobody has been back since then. That's crazy. I mean, many people have been up in the sky as astronauts, but only 2 people have been only 11 kilometers down to the deepest part of the sea. Who lives there? How do they live there? How do their lives connect with ours? Hundreds, thousands of questions yet to be answered. So I wish I could live to 100 lifetimes, because I've only begun to answer some of the questions that I've started to wonder about. And I just hope that you will pick up those questions and carry on. But we have to hurry. Some children, some grown-ups, I myself sometimes am discouraged about the future of humankind, about the future of the world as we know it, because there are so many problems that we now face. We look around and we see wars. We see people now, almost 7 billion people on this little blue speck of a planet in the great universe that exists. This tiny little place in the corner of one galaxy, a corner of just one piece of this huge, immense, the vastness of space. It's a miracle that we exist at all. For 7.5 billion years it has taken to arrive at this point in history where we have a planet that works in our favor. There's oxygen in the atmosphere, just the right amount. 20% oxygen, 80% nitrogen, and just enough carbon dioxide and other gases that make the world function in our favor. We have climate that after all these many billions, hundreds of millions of years, thousands of years, moving up to the time that we now share, the planet has changed many times through history. But right now, it suits us. Right now, we live in this moment in time when everything seems to be going for us. When I arrived on Earth, there were only about 2 billion people. Now, I have seen population of us, of humans, more than triple. That seems like good news. The world is favorable for humankind. Look at how many of us there are. But now we know that partly because there are so many people drawing on what makes the planet function, the water, the wildlife, the trees, that we're changing the nature of this little blue speck in the universe. We are causing problems for the future. We're causing problems for right now. There are many people now who are hungry. There are many people now who do not have access to fresh water. In my lifetime, since I was a girl, the number of fish in the sea, from where they were to where they are now, many of the species that we like to eat have dropped 90%. Only 10% of the sharks, 10% of the tunas, the swordfish, many of the creatures that we have consumed. There are far fewer whales today than there were going back 500 years ago. We're so good at catching whales and dolphins and fish and shrimp and crabs for us to consume that the ocean now is in trouble. At the same time, we're putting things into the ocean that are changing the chemistry of the ocean. Even the climate, the weather, the temperature of the planet is changing because of what we put into the atmosphere. Too much carbon dioxide because of fossil fuels that we burn to acquire the energy, to give us light, to give us power, to take us from one place to another. When I was a girl, we did not know this could be a problem. We thought the ocean was so vast, so resilient, that the whole planet could accommodate whatever we wanted to do. But now you are the luckiest generation ever to come along. And I'm lucky too, because I'm still here. And I can see what was not known earlier in time. Now we know we've got problems. And now, knowing that we have problems, we can find solutions. There's still time to take the pressure off of the natural systems that keep us alive. That's what I do right now. I am a scientist. I love exploring the ocean. I've used 30 different kinds of submarines. I've spent thousands of hours just diving into the ocean. I have 3 children. One of them is here, right here in the front row. Gail. Put your hand up, Gail. She drives submarines, too. She's had many hours underwater, too. I have another daughter, and I have a son. I have 4 grandsons. I worry about their future. I worry about your future. But mostly, I am confident, and I have hope, because now we know that we have problems, and now we know there are solutions that start with taking care of the ocean, taking care of the fish, taking care of the birds, the trees, the natural systems that keep us alive. There is still time, but probably the next 10 years, your time, is the most important time in all of the past or future, because you will determine everything that follows in a magnified way. The next 10 years may be the most important in the next 10,000 years. So, be happy. Rejoice because you're alive. You have a chance, as no generation before has had a chance, to make a difference, to secure an enduring future for our species, only if we take care of the other species that share space and time with us on this little blue speck in the universe. Thank you.
Thank you very much. And now the floor is of Ada Yonath. Es premio Nobel de Química. El premio lo recibió después de cenar en San Sebastián, 3 días después de cenar en San Sebastián, ¿no? 3 días. Eso no creemos que influyó, pero bueno, seguro que iba.
Eskerrik asko, muchas gracias, toda raba, and thank you very much for trying to listen to me. After Sylvia told you almost everything that you should know, at least from her point of view, which is the point of view of global, I hope I understood you, of global science and global life. So I want to start in a different way. First, to answer the question, what is driving science? And as Sylvia thinks, I do too. Curiosity. And curiosity. And even more curiosity. If one wants to know something burning inside one, boy, girl, man, woman, whoever, then if this question is also of fundamental importance, then there will be a way to get closer to the answer. Sometimes to the real answer, sometimes just almost to the answer. Whatever level you're looking at, if one is curious, one can reach heights. Real heights in science and especially in fulfilling one's curiosity. So I wanted to start this way. And I wanted to tell you that since I remember myself, and my parents told me even before I remember myself, I was curious. And I was a really young child, kindergarten child, 5 years old. I made an experiment that until now is not finished, and I'll tell you why. And I even have proofs for this experiment. So I was 5, and we lived in a very little apartment. We were very poor, and this is Jerusalem. 4 rooms for 3 families, 1 toilet, 1 kitchen. And there was 1 little balcony. So in one afternoon when my parents were not at home, I decided to measure the height from the floor to the ceiling of this balcony, because that was actually the only place I could be alone. So I put a table and a chair and another chair and another. And I still didn't reach the ceiling. So I climbed on it. I thought if I stand and I push my hand up, I will reach. I reached the garden downstairs. I fell down 2 floors. Broke my hand really badly. More than half a year I was in a cast, and it had to be broken and recast. And all my pictures of this age have the cast. It means I have a proof that this experiment was done. And I was back in this house about a year ago, and I wanted to measure it at least now, so I know the distance from the floor to the ceiling. But they changed it a bit, the owners. So till now, this experiment is not finished. I don't have the answer. But I do have answers for many other experiments that I did in my life. And my interest went from global things, basic things, like measuring, like understanding how creatures live. That was really very, very exciting for me when I was young, about your age, to trying to understand processes, natural processes and life processes, how things happen in the living cell, not only how the living cell or the living organism is moving or breathing or whatever it does, multiply, but also how the cell is existing. But let me go back a little bit to my childhood, because I think that actually this is the time that formed me, and I hope that can form those of you that have wish to understand, a great, great wish to understand. So as I told you, I was born and lived in a very poor family. Not only this, my father died when I was 11. My mother, who was very well educated in the way women were educated at that time, spoke 4 languages, could read and write, and was very creative. But she didn't know mathematics at all. She had plus and minus. I think she knew to divide, but she didn't know how to calculate percentage. 5% of something? When I was 11, my father dies, and my mother comes to me and said, "Can you help me? I have to calculate now that the father is not there. I have to calculate 5%. How one does this?" So can you imagine a child, 11 years old, that lost her father, lost her grandmother in the war a few years earlier, and an uncle? It means there were not too many people in the world around me to educate me or to help me. My mother, my only pillar, doesn't even know what I knew when I was in the 4th grade. So this, I think this was something that made me feel that one has to study. And when I studied, I found more and more and more questions I wanted to answer. That's the way I was going. I had to work very hard. I hardly could study. I had to help her raising my little sister. I don't want to talk about it. I just want to tell you that I didn't know that there is a profession called scientist until I reached the university. And I went to the university as a student because I had to be next to my mother to help her. She was not well at that time, not only poor, but so I had to be around. I actually wanted to go somewhere else, but let's not talk about what I didn't do. Let's talk about what I did do. So I thought university studying is so interesting. Why shouldn't I do it? I had a good fellowship, a good grant. They even, in the high school, they even supported me because I'll help them. So I could afford studying. And then I found out that I thought that university, let's go back. I thought that university is to teach a profession. One finishes university, becomes a teacher, becomes a laboratory helper, becomes a diagnosed, can go to become a doctor. I didn't think that somebody can come to work every day to work on a problem that is interesting for this particular somebody and be paid for it, get salary, just to do what you want to do in order to understand. This was so fascinating for me that I kept learning, and you see I'm here today to tell you that there is a lot of fun, even when it looks very difficult. People ask me, how do you feel sitting in the lab all day and doing these little experiments, just looking at your test tubes? No, it's not like this. Life of scientist is full of fun. I mean intellectual fun, and also real fun. You meet intelligent people, you interact with young people, younger than you, older than you, your age. Everybody has his own way of thinking. You try to answer the questions that are of interest for you, or help somebody else, or collaborate with somebody. You don't have to give up so much. You have more. The input is much higher than the output. It's not sitting in the lab and doing little things. It's trying to answer big questions. And I wish I told you something. I only want to tell you 2 more anecdotes. One is I gave a lecture in Ann Arbor in America, like last month, an open lecture. There were about 1,000 people. In the first row, there was a 13-year-old boy. He didn't he was not ashamed to ask a question after the lecture. The best question in the whole crowd, and one of the best I ever got in my life. It turned my thinking to something else. So being young and scientists that just start, or students, is a big advantage, because the mind is still not forced to think in one way. Please try to take advantage of it. And the other thing, the other little anecdote that I want to tell you is a question that a colleague of mine was asked. He got the Nobel Prize. He actually was here, Hanover, just 2 days ago. He was asked, after you got the Nobel Prize, do you think there will be Nobel Prize in 50 years from now? There will be still questions to answer? You know what he said? Exactly what Sylvia said. Every question we answer, we found that there are 50 questions behind it, which are may sometimes even more interesting or even more challenging. And in my own science, if you go tomorrow to the lecture, you will hear about the ribosome and the factory within every cell. But this factory is being attacked by antibiotics. And you know, antibiotics are materials that doctors are using when you have infection, or big infection, small infection, stomach infection, and also tuberculosis. These diseases were killers until the middle of last century. People died before 1954, when they started to use antibiotics medically. People died very young. Mozart died 36 years old because of an infectious disease that they couldn't treat. Since there are antibiotics, these diseases could be treated. And in the middle of last century, everybody said, no, nobody will die now from infectious diseases. We have antibiotics, penicillin first, and afterwards erythromycin. And it was correct for a few years until the bacteria, the pathogenic bacteria, the disease bacteria, learned to resist the antibiotics. Because bacteria also want to live, not only us. Not only the small creatures of you, also bacteria. And since resistance came, antibiotics are more difficult to be used, and also there are some diseases that cannot be treated anymore. So just from my little wish to understand how the cell works, now we know, or we have a guide how to improve antibiotics, or how to think about new ideas in antibiotics. I want to say just very general way. So it came out. I knew about antibiotics. I didn't believe I can understand them. Now I can. It's a bonus to my work. It's much more than I expected. And I'm very happy that this can help humanity. So just go after your curiosity. You can even reach medical improvements. And thank you again.
So, now we will begin with the questions. I'm sure one question will be for you, Ada. What was the question that this 13 years old? But I'm sure one of the questions will be, what was this 13-year-old question? but for later. Now we will explain the system. We will have one or two questions. Go for coffee fast and come back, because there are many questions. I will ask, of course, we could stay the whole day listening to our two speakers, but there are so many questions that I will ask to be, as short as possible, because all will have the opportunity to ask. We will finish, it is a tradition here, at 1:30.
Bueno, egunon guztioi. Azalduko dizuet pixka bat nola egingo dugu froga bat edo bi galderekin, eta gero atsedenera joango gea, eta gero jarraituko dugu galdera guztiekin. De cara a hacer las preguntas, el procedimiento que vamos a seguir es el siguiente. Hemos preparado 3 botes con preguntas de la lista que tenéis. Hicimos una selección, juntamos algunas que eran semejantes, eliminamos las que estaban repetidas, procurando que quedaran las más interesantes y que todos los colegios tuvieran su pregunta o alguna de sus preguntas aquí en los botes. Entonces, sin más, iré sacando, diré el número y el colegio que formuló esa pregunta, Entonces, bueno, por favor os levantáis y pedís el micrófono, habrá en los dos lados gente con los micrófonos y bueno, planteáis vuestra pregunta. Leerla despacio para que los traductores puedan hacer bien su trabajo, presentaros también y nada más. Eso es todo. Hacemos, como os digo, 1 o 2 preguntas y pasaremos al descanso, pero no os preocupéis que luego continuamos.
1 or 2 questions now and later coffee and then come back for more questions.
What made you start the investigation with ribosomes instead of other parts of the cell?
The process that I wanted to understand is how the cell components are being produced. All cells have lots of components that do everything that the cell needs. Oh, no, not everything, almost everything. They are called proteins. Like you probably know about some of them, hemoglobin that transfers oxygen, or insulin that controls the sugar in the blood. You know about enzymes. I'm pretty sure most of you know that enzymes are cutting or putting together. These are all of these are cell workers. They are doing what the cell needs every day, like hemoglobin or trypsin, that is an enzyme that cuts, and also proteins that are made for specific use. For instance, those that can control heart problems. You may have an uncle or grandfather or somebody old in your family that will tell, oh, I had ache. I was brought to the hospital and the doctor told me that I took care of it myself. These are the enzymes that can repair some of the heart problems. We don't need them all the time. We need them only when there is a problem. It means when we are 1 year, 2 years, 3 years old, we have the instructions how to make these proteins, but we don't make them if we don't need them. The instructions for these proteins and for the normal everyday proteins are always in the DNA, what is called genes. Now, when I was a student in school in your age, DNA was only discovered. But you all know DNA. And if you don't know it from school, you know it from the police. Because the police uses it for identified murderers or whatever criminals. So DNA is the storage where the instructions for all proteins are in. Proteins that do almost everything. Now there are instructions and there are proteins. How is the chain from the instructions to the proteins? There is a chain of reactions, and inside it there is a factory that makes the proteins. Proteins are like a string of building blocks, and the sequence, the order of the building blocks is determined by the gene. And also the order of the building blocks determine how the protein can work. And I really wanted to know how the proteins are being made, because I think it's a fundamental reaction. It's a fundamental process. One of the proofs for being fundamental is the antibiotics. You stop this, you stop life. Maybe not in this generation, next generation. In bacteria, it means tomorrow or the day after. So I wanted to understand it. And when I was younger, and I had only very little laboratory and very little resources, I knew that many people try to understand how ribosomes work. This factory is called ribosome or ribosome in Spanish and also in Hebrew. So how these ribosomes work, people try to understand. For this, they had to know their structure, and the determination of the structure was extremely difficult. Actually, it was written in many articles that it's not possible, because in order to understand the structure, one needs crystals. And people could not get crystals of ribosomes because ribosomes are complicated. They have many structures, many ways that they appear, and they deteriorate, they degrade very quickly. So people could not get it, and I thought that I can work on factors that make the ribosome work. I thought this is also important. There are factors in the cell that tell, now start working. These are called initiation factors. Start, now start, we need you. We need now this protein for the heart problem, and so on. So I tried to work on these little ones, and please don't misunderstand, this was difficult. I started in 1975, and until now we don't know exactly how they do it. Partially yes, partially not. But while working on it, I don't want to go into the whole story unless you want me, because it's a nice story. But the end of the story was that I made a collaboration with a group in Berlin, the Max Planck Institute in Berlin. I had to come there in some time for the experiment, but I had a bicycle accident. I was ill. I had to go through operations. I was really very weak. It took about 6 months, 7 months until I could come, and meanwhile they finished their experiment, but they didn't let me know. So I was there, and I thought, well, if we don't do the preparation of this initiation factor, I at least go to the library and read. You talked about books. I didn't want to stop you. So let me tell you about what I read. Not a book, just an article. I don't even remember in which journal. It was not actually a scientific journal. It was something like in between, like Science Today or something, or National Geography or something like this. And what did I read? People say that crystals of ribosomes cannot be obtained before this. You know what are crystals? Something that is fully ordered in 3 dimensions. Tack, 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 tack. This is a crystal. When you buy sodium chloride, when you buy salt, it's already crystal. So people said ribosomes cannot produce crystals because of the reasons I told you earlier. Complicated, many structures, and easily deteriorating, degrading. They have 57 different components, so the contacts between them were not strong enough to keep long enough to be crystallized. This many people tried, and many very, very good people. Even the person, Watson, you know Watson in Greek that did the DNA structure, even he tried for 3 years. And they failed. And the idea was that ribosomes cannot crystallize. But when I was in the library, I read an article talking about how the bears in the North Pole live in the winter. Hibernating, you know what is hibernating? You know what it is? Sleeping in the winter. So they go to sleep in October, November, and they get up in April, May. While they were sleeping, people found, the investigators that did this investigation about them, this study, they found that the ribosomes are very well ordered inside their cells, on the membranes. One, only monolayer, not in 3 dimensions, just monolayer, but completely ordered. So I thought, the bears can do it. The bears can order their ribosomes. Every bear, every winter. So maybe we can also be as clever as the bears and try to do it in the laboratory, in the test tube, with ribosomes from bacteria, which are more interesting, at least for me. Second, I thought, why do the bears do this? I thought the bears, that nature gives them a machinery, a procedure, that when they go to sleep, they pack the ribosomes orderly, so when they get up and they have to do things that they didn't do when they were sleeping, they have active ribosomes to make proteins. And this is why I decided to start ribosomes. But what I really wanted to understand is how proteins are being made. Did I answer you?
Thank you very much.
Zientziari buruzko galdera bat. La número 47, berrogeita zazpi, Instituto de Educación Secundaria, Koldo Michelena.
Zein da momentuko egoera Mexikoko golkoan? Erabat errekuperatuko da? Zein da zure iritziz gaur egun itsasoko ekosistemetan dagoen arazorik larriena?
The Gulf of Mexico, now having received about 5 million barrels of oil, much of it still there, will never be the same. It will recover, but it will never be what it was had the oil and nearly 2 million gallons of toxic dispersants been applied to the Gulf of Mexico. It's just not realistic to think that it can go back to what it was. Already the Gulf was in trouble before the big spill that took place starting last April because of large-scale fishing, like much of the rest of the world. The shrimping is a big problem because trawls are used to scrape the ocean floor and in the process destroy whatever is on the ocean floor. In my lifetime, since I was a little girl, I've seen in the Gulf of Mexico and the adjacent Caribbean Sea the loss of coral. In many areas, 80% of the coral is gone. In the Gulf of Mexico, even before the spill, about half of the coral reefs were already gone or in serious trouble. So this added burden is not good news for the systems in the Gulf of Mexico, but it is one in a long series of problems. But it is one positive thing is that it has served to awaken people to the issues, and perhaps we'll have a bright side in that there are some actions being taken to try to protect what remains of healthy places in the Gulf, the coral reefs that still remain. There are moves afoot to try to protect areas in the Gulf of Mexico to restore the depleted populations of shrimp and fish and other forms of wildlife. But it's going to take time. But at least people are beginning to be aware. The biggest problem, of course there's a problem with what we're putting into the ocean, whether it's oil or whether it's the carbon dioxide excess or the flow of sewage or whatever, lots of things that we put in the ocean. Plastics are a big problem now that did not exist when I was a child, but now are a major problem all over the world. I see it on the beach right here in San Sebastian. You can look for it too. Little tiny chips of plastic that are among the grains of sand. Sometimes in places you can see more bits of plastic than there are grains of sand. It's true in the plankton in the ocean too. More bits of plastic floating around than there are living organisms. It's very troublesome, but again, that's one problem. The other, what we're taking out, that's the other big problem. But the biggest problem of all is that people don't know. It's the ignorance. It's lack of understanding that the ocean is in trouble, and the corollary to that if the ocean is in trouble, we're in trouble. We used to think it didn't matter what we did to the ocean, but now we know that if we take care of the ocean, we're really taking care of ourselves.
Iritziari buruzko edo galdera batekin, eta bueno, euskun inozente bat bilatuko dut, hurrengo ateratzeko. La número 78, 78, Lauro ikastola.
You are a pioneer in biochemistry. What is the future of this science? Would you recommend doing a career in biochemistry?
I'm not a prophet. I cannot talk about future in general. Also, the word biochemistry is now not exactly describing a type of science. Look at our science. The question is in biology, how cells are making their workers. The method is physics, diffraction of X-rays, it's pure physics. The interpretation of the results are high mathematics. The answer is in chemistry, atom-to-atom distances or non-distances. So it's 4 different categories that are called biochemistry in new words and in many other articles. So it's very, very difficult for me to answer a question that talks about biochemistry, or now many people talk about biotechnology. When I was a student, it was called biophysics. The future of science, of natural science, I can maybe answer somehow. But about biochemistry, I don't know. I know that it's most important is to study the topics that are of interest for you as a human being, as a student, and that are foundations for other studies. So it's much better to study physics and chemistry than to start from what is called today biotechnology, because the foundations sometimes are not full. And in order to do high-class science, you have to be much more exposed to other categories, not only to a very little category. So if you ask me if there is still scientific future, if there is still future for work in the laboratory for science, yes, there is a lot. We talked about it earlier. Every finding that we have today opened the door for another 15 new questions. What exactly to study for it is what is interesting for you. When your real passion should be there, you will find the questions to answer.
Beste galdera bat. Zenbaki txikia atera zaigu. La número 4. Talaia bigarren hezkuntza institutuak egindakoa.
Zer suposatzen du zuretzat Nobel saria jaso duen lehenengo israeldar emakume izatea, eta bidea irekitzen ari zarela uste duzu?
Let me correct your statement. The first woman was Marie Curie 100 years ago, in chemistry. The second was Julie Curie, her daughter, in about 3 or 4 years later. The third woman in chemistry was Dorothy Hodgkin, 46 years ago. So being the first is not exactly the way to describe me.
I'm sorry, Jonah, the first Israeli woman.
The first Israeli woman, I'll talk about Israel in a minute, but I'm talking now about chemistry. Meanwhile, not many, but few women got the Nobel Prize in medicine and in economic. I don't know about many in physics. Again, Marie Curie, 100 years ago. Actually, next year is the International Year of Chemistry, and this will start with the place where Marie Curie gave the first lecture. So it's I know 46 years between prize to prize is already a lot of excitement, and in Israel being the first woman is I'm overwhelmed. The whole country is so encouraging and so interested. Everybody knows now what is ribosome. Children are in carnivals, they are coming up as ribosomes. So, it's me. There is already a wig like me. And there are cartoons that describe me with antibiotics in my head, and there are cartoons saying, like one cartoon, political cartoon, the Prime Minister Bibi and the President Perez are jumping and dancing. We are good in chemistry, we are good in chemistry. Or Obama stands next to me and said, can you make some chemistry between me and your government? Things like this. It changed the view about this and also about science. Young people, your age and a little bit older, About 2 years or 3 years earlier, people were asked, what will you like to do when you grow up, or what profession you see for yourself? And science was not very high. Chemistry was even lower than main science. And now the numbers jumped up. People say between 20 to 50% between the young people. Maybe they will not go to study, not all of them, but at least some. Children are writing to me from the age of 5, 6, to the age of 18. They send me books that they write, and they ask questions, and I get songs, and I go from school to school and talk to them. And I think it made a lot of impression in the country, but in Israel. But if we look about global, I'm not the first.
Okay.
Zientzia eta ikerketei buruzko galdera bat. Seguimos con otra sobre ciencia e investigación. Vamos a ver. La número 12. La número 12 propuesta por la American School of Bilbao. Y va dirigida a Sylvia Earle.
The ocean is pretty much unknown. In how many years and with what improvements in technology will it become known for the human society? And as a race, even now essentially still land-based, what can we do to understand the oceans better?
Can you repeat it? Because you go at the speed of light, slowly.
Okay. The ocean is pretty much unknown. In how many years and with what improvements in technology will it become known for the human society? And as a race, even now essentially still land-based, what can we do to understand the oceans better?
We'll never know all that we need to know about the ocean, which means we will never stop exploring. And that's a good thing. There will always be questions to answer. But there are so many basic things that we need to understand about the ocean. Going back to the middle of the 20th century, we did not know of the existence of the mountain chains that are down the middle of the Atlantic, the Pacific, the Indian Oceans. We didn't know about the existence of life in the deepest sea. We didn't understand that there's life from the surface to the greatest depths. We didn't know when I was a child, the abundance and the diversity of life in the sea. Now we know so much that was previously not understood. We've learned more about the ocean in the last 50 years than during all preceding history. We have better means of exploring now than we did 50 years ago, and the pace is picking up of understanding the importance of the ocean. We didn't know until last week, or about 2 weeks ago, when an article came out in Science magazine, that we have the capacity to have such an impact on the ocean with respect to plankton. 40% lower plankton in the ocean today than in 1950. Evidently connected to human actions, with perhaps a connection to the change in the climate change issues, the warming of the ocean, but also what we're putting into the sea. We didn't know that we have the capacity to really deplete the ocean of the wildlife that is there on the scale that we have demonstrated that we now can do. There's so much that we have learned that we now have to act on. The problems that have to be solved, well, it would help to be able to go to the deepest part of the sea, not just once in history, but to be able to go as often as you like, and not just for scientists either. We need to be able to take the heads of companies and the heads of countries and to be able to take any of you down to see what the ocean is actually like, more deeper than you can go just as a diver. We need to have many more submarines. Presently, there are only 5 submarines that can go to as much as half the ocean's depth, and none exist They can go to full ocean depth, 11 kilometers down. There's so much more to do, both in terms of engineering, using the capability that we have to go high in the sky to take us now deep in the sea, and to learn how to protect the oceans, to safeguard the life support system, not just for the creatures in the sea, but in a sense we're all sea creatures in that we now know that the ocean keeps us alive too. We really must figure out what to do to restore health to the ocean. The Gulf of Mexico is one great example. It can be improved, and there are actions that we can take, but we need to understand first what the real problems are and to be able to work from a knowledge base greater than what we now have.
Thank you. Venga, laguntza bilatu dugu. Borobila, egungarren galdera. La número 100. Saturnino de la Peña Institutuak egindakoa.
Ada Yonath, elkarrizketa batean adierazi zenuen Real Madrid aurkikuntza zientifikoak baino erakargarriagoa dela. Zientzia interesa galtzen ari dela uste duzu, baldago egoera honi buelta ematea?
First of all, I want to apologize for the previous question. In the translation, the word Israel was not mentioned, so now I understand the question. Second, I didn't say one thing which I think is very important for me. The prize changed a lot of things in the country, and it is fantastic for me to see how much excitement there is around the prize. But the real scientific excitement when we saw the first structure is much, much, much more higher. And it's inside me rather than the whole world knows about it. The scientific achievement is the real reward. Prize is nice, but it's not the reason to do science, and it's not as deep as the scientific. Now about Real Madrid. Last week I was in Madrid, and I met them. They stayed in the same hotel I did. So I said, about Real Madrid, I said before I met them. Afterwards I met them. When I entered the hotel, nobody knew about me. Even the receptionist, he just had, my name was there, and I got a room. When they had to come a day later, the street was closed. There were barriers. People were standing inside and outside, young and older, with the papers ready for autographs. I didn't know who is going to come. I asked the reception. I just stepped in. We cannot tell you. I thought it at least the Prime Minister. We cannot tell you. Be quiet on the side. Then you will see. So I decided to go to the balcony. There is an inside balcony in this hotel to see from top. And after 2 minutes, 2 big guys with revolvers came. You cannot stand here. It's not allowed. So I thought really somebody, until I found out that it's Real Madrid. And I was so happy. I went with them together in the elevator. but the hotelman that took them up was really upset with me. I took one stand. The elevator has... So of course they are much more, they are admired by many more people, and their contribution to society, whatever we can think about it, is much more noticed. This is no question about it. If the people from Real Madrid knew who I am, maybe we could talk. I just didn't expose myself. I don't know if they are interested in science or not. But I know that in Israel, many of the sports people do show interest. And we show interest in sports. I like swimming and boating, but some other like some other things. I don't think there is a conflict between there. I just think that they are more famous. And they can fill up a stadium with 70,000 people. I won't be able to do this. even if all your schools will come together. Thank you.
But you will be filling our small stadium in Cursal tomorrow. That will be packed to listen to you, and that I am very proud of the city of San Sebastian. And you will be happy to know that Barcelona defeated Real Madrid in the crucial match 4-1.
Yeah, I noticed that. And I will be very happy to give tomorrow a full lecture room, and I do sometimes, but still I think sport talk to more people, and also art. I think singers and dancers and theater, they have their own way to communicate with public, and public can easier communicate with them. Still, I'm very proud of science.
Zientzia eta ikerketari buruzko beste galdera bat, otra sobre ciencia y tecnología. Vamos a ver. 114. Colegio Alemán San Alberto Magno. No, han sido a última hora y no están en todas las copias. Pero bueno, los interesados creo que las han podido recoger.
¿Hasta qué punto está afectando y va a afectar el calentamiento del océano a los corales y los arrecifes? Muchas gracias.
The warming trend of the planet as a whole does seem to have an impact on coral reefs everywhere. It's not the only factor, however. A problem occurs when, during especially the hot months, the summer months, with prolonged temperatures above the normal average temperatures, that corals tend to lose their associated symbiotic algae, and they expel these colorful little organisms, and the corals go pale, they go white. They call it coral bleaching, and it's astonishing. In fact, right now, coral reefs are experiencing this phenomenon on a wide scale, much more so than for several years prior. There was another major bleaching event in 1998, and this is comparable to that time, when in places that are really regarded as reasonably healthy, such as Palau and parts of the Coral Sea, are for the first time showing great signs of stress. Reefs that are intact, that are really healthy, that is when even the fish are part of the system and have not been depleted, when the lobsters still are there, when all of the ingredients that make a coral reef, not just the corals themselves, but the whole system, they are more resilient. They may also experience this bleaching that is apparently induced by warm temperatures, but they recover more quickly than those that are not complete. Distressed reefs are more susceptible to the bleaching and may not recover after one or two such events. And that's part of the reason that around the world, coral reefs are in serious trouble. Why about half are either gone or in a state of great decline. And the concern is that with an increase in temperature that seems projected with an increase in carbon dioxide, by the middle of the 21st century, our century now, there may not be much in the way of coral reefs, except maybe in deep water, where the water tends to be cooler and more stable. But in the area where most corals grow, from the surface down to 50 meters or so, what we now know and love as coral reefs may be mostly history, unless we can figure out how to reduce the amount of carbon dioxide that we emit into the atmosphere, how to protect much more of the ocean than is now secured with some form of protection. It's not easy for many people to see that that fish keep coral reefs healthy. That if you take the fish away from a reef, it's like taking well, imagine what makes a city thrive. It isn't just the buildings. It isn't just the coral that makes a coral reef thrive. It's all of the residents that are there. You need all of the living parts to be intact to be able to resist some of the impacts that are now new to coral reefs around the world. So there are things that we can do, but we first have to be aware of what the problems are.
Zazpigarrena aldatze de la providencia ikastolak egindakoa. Ada Jonathentzat.
Gogoratzen alduzu noiz eta non ikusi zenuen lehen aldiz herribosoma bat?
Ribosomes were identified in the cell in the 60s, in 1960-some, after the DNA was found, and after it was found that proteins are being made according to the DNA, people looked for it. Actually, it's very interesting. A refugee from Romania, Palade, that went to America in Rockefeller Institute, he found in the cell black bodies, black rings, and they were called Palade particles because nobody knew that they have a real structure. And he suggested that this is the place where ribosomes are being made. So first time I saw this picture, which was very, very unclear. Within the 60s, the ribosomes were identified as real particles with real components and not just a collection of some cell components. And then people saw them and could clean them and look at them with electron microscope and see their main build, the way they build, their architecture, but not how they work. And from then on, they tried, as I said earlier, people tried to get crystals to see how they work, to understand the function. Because function in biology, in life, cannot be understood without structure. And I can give you a little example. For instance, let's say that I am a protein, an enzyme that has to pick up these glasses. You see? I hold them with 2 fingers. I can put them, I can hold them. 2 fingers, this is what I'm using. This is my machine. If you can imagine that this finger is coming now up there, so I still have the 2 fingers. This is here and this is there. I won't be able to pick up the glasses. I have all the components, but not in the correct position. Only when they are here, I can pick it up. If one was there, I could not. So this is understanding function by structure. The structure of the ribosome of every protein, of every molecule, explain how it functions. And this is what we wanted to see. The first time we saw it was in 1999 at the end. Almost the whole small part of the ribosome. Ribosomes are made of 2 parts. And in 2000 we could see the whole of it. And you can't imagine, I said earlier, you can't imagine what I was going through. It was just unbelievable for me. Did I answer? This is what you wanted to know? To see every atom in place. The ribosomes have 250,000 atoms, and the small subunit has about a little bit less than 100,000 atoms, and we could see one by one. This was just fantastic. We could see how it can read the genetic message and how it can tell the large subunit how to make the protein. Just then.
Zenbakia, haundia berriru, 113. O sea que estas de las que están ocultas, pero creo que el English School sí que tiene la lista.
How can you improve, or how could we improve the recognition of scientists in the Spanish society?
Both.
Well, I guess it could start with you. In terms of just acknowledging the importance of science. In my country, in the United States, science is not as widely as appreciated, perhaps, as it is here in Spain. And it's a mystery. Why not? It seems so basic that everyone should want to understand how the world works, from the smallest cell or the smallest component of the smallest cell to what makes our place in the universe, and to want to understand. It's what drives human beings. And science is about trying to figure out the big questions. Where did we come from? Who are we? Where are we going? I think it's up to each and every one of you, of us, of all of us, to acknowledge the importance of science. You don't have to be a scientist to appreciate and to celebrate and to do what it takes to support scientific inquiry, because our lives really depend on knowing. And that's what science is all about knowing.
So I admit that in our life, in our days, science is not appreciated in the highest level because of several reasons. Of course, I talked earlier about sport and about art. Let's talk about people that go to study. The scientists are not known to make money very fast, like the high-tech people. Or like, I don't really want to go into all. It's also not, from the economic point of view, it's not the biggest one. Still, science is not the lowest, and to make it to make more appreciation, I'm not sure that this is so important. I think that's more important is that people that want to do science will know that it's possible and it is rewarding, even without having a lot of money quickly, or without a lot of recognition, or without a lot of prizes. It's much more internal. And if I'm allowed to speak for a minute about genders, I don't think that science has to do anything with men or women. Science has to do something with scientists. Still, I see here a lot of girls, young girls. And I see young students, a lot of them when I teach. I don't see so many mature female scientists or very high female scientists. And I want to talk about it for a minute here to encourage at least you, that you came here all the way here, you're interested in science. The societies are not encouraging girls to go to science. The society, they say you won't find a husband, you won't have a family, you want to this, you have to do other things. I think I cannot change the society, but I at least can change the mind of this young female that think about enjoying science or doing science. It's possible. It's really possible. It's possible to have a family. You heard Sylvia. I also have a daughter and a granddaughter that gave me the best prize in my life, the Grandmother of the Year. And she gave it 5 years ago. She hanged it in my office. You think the Nobel is something? That's much more. She hanged it, and it was much before the prize. And I asked her, why didn't you write a year? It says the Grandmother of the Year is Ada Yonath. No year. I asked her, why didn't you write a year? And she said, you have to prove yourself every year to be the best Grandmother of the Year. So it's already 5 years on my wall. I think that I proved it at least for 5 years. But that's not what I want to tell you. I want to tell you that it's possible and it's enjoyable if one has passion to knowledge and love to human beings and family. It's possible. So I'm not sure that I answered the question how to increase the image of science. I don't have a clue how to do this except for encourage you to do best science you can do and best for yourself.
Urrengo galdera, 92. Número 92. Pasai Lezo lizeoak egindakoa.
Do you have free time to relax? Free time to relax? Do you have?
Well, it's up to us. It depends what is relaxation.
What is for you?
It depends what relaxation means. Some people think that relax is lying on the beach and turning from right to left for half a day. Well, we can do this if we like. Although sometimes in our heads something else is going on, not only the turning. I'm swimming quite a lot, and I'm reading a lot, and I'm even trying to write sometimes, if this is called relax. But yesterday, by chance, I got a presentation of 2 slides. And there, the presentation is a question that was asked, an answer to a question that was asked to a woman who is now 100 years old, Rita. Her name is Rita, first name. I'll tell you the second if you want. She's a Nobel Prize winner in medicine in Rome. And they asked her, did you ever stop working? And she said, stop working? This dries the brain. The brain becomes dry. Never do this.
So for some, it seems that work is here and play is there, that resting or free time is the time you look forward to, and work is what you have to do in order to have groceries and clothes and a place to live and all of that. For me, it's like a fellow scientist who said, I've never worked a day in my life, because for him and for me, my work is my play. I do what I love, and there's no real division. I think I'm happiest when I'm doing what some people would call work. It's not really work to do the kind of thing that I want to do. And I guess it's a privilege to have that opportunity. And while it's not as financially rewarding, perhaps, as some things that I might be able to do with my life, if my goal were to make a lot of money, what would I do with a lot of money? I would do what I'm doing. I mean, it is the best of both worlds to have the freedom to pursue what I love. And yes, as far as rest goes, I have to sleep. But I figure that in 100 years, I'll do a lot of sleeping. So I might as well try to do as much as I can with every waking moment that I can possibly manage. So sleep is something, I love to sleep, but I love to be awake even more, doing things that I love to do.
Vamos con una pregunta sobre ciencia, investigaciones. La número 15. Aniturri bigarren hezkuntza institutua.
Hi, Miss Earle. As far as I know, you are in favor of sea farms as a solution to overfishing and destruction of the sea. Otherwise, it seems that ecologists don't support aquaculture or aquafarming since they don't think it is sustainable. And they give an example. 1 kilo of farmer guilty dream requires 10 kilo of pelagic catfish. What do you think about it?
Concerning aquaculture, I think it depends on the method that is chosen and the kinds of creatures that are chosen. We do not raise snow leopards to eat because, first of all, it takes a lot of other kinds of animals to feed leopards or tigers or lions or other carnivorous fish or animals. Raising carnivorous fish really doesn't make sense. Raising tuna does not make sense. Raising salmon does not make sense because they all eat fish. They eat other animals. Think about the animals that we do eat. The cows, the chickens, the pigs, the ducks, the geese. Every one is naturally a plant eater, a grazer, an herbivore. So you take sunlight's energy to make plants, to make protein. And so if we are going to cultivate aquatic animals the way we do the animals from the land, the same recipe should apply. Sunlight, plants, protein. There's some animals, some fish that are being cultivated. And in China, for more than 1,000 years, several species of carp, a freshwater plant-eating fish, they have been cultivated in ponds. Sometimes they have 4 or 5 different kinds of carp, all plant-eating fish, in one pond, with ducks on the surface that fertilize the water, that causes the plants to prosper, that causes food for the fish to happen. And this is one efficient way to turn sunlight through plants to protein to food for people. Taking wild fish is not a very efficient way of getting sunlight to plants for food for us because there's so many steps along the way. Fish that eat fish that eat fish that eat fish that finally get down to the small crustaceans that eat the little plants that take the sunlight's energy. So to make a pound of beef, it may take about 20 pounds of plants for 1 pound of beef taken to market in 1 year. To make a pound of chicken, it's maybe 2 pounds of plants, sunlight, plants, chicken in 1 year or less. Carp, the same thing, about 2 pounds of plants to make a pound of carp. Tilapia, that's an African fish that is now cultivated in ponds, about the same amount, very efficient. And if we're going to feed a lot of people, if we're going to grow protein most efficiently, we should be doing it by choosing animals. Well, first we should choose plants because that's the best way to feed a lot of people, and most of that's where our calories come from. It doesn't make sense to raise carnivorous animals for us to eat. And so, it also, I think, is a little dangerous to have pens out in the ocean to raise whatever kinds of fish we raise. Much better to think about controlled systems, like an aquarium, if you will. Aquariums have taught us so much about how to keep captive animals, to keep them healthy, to keep them alive, and how to be efficient about growing them. So if we have controlled systems, contained systems for catfish, carp, tilapia, we can get, as those in the business say, more crop per drop. You have the same amount of water that gets recycled over and over again, more efficiently than growing cows in terms of protein production, if that's your goal. Now, I love the idea of aquaculture to feed people as a way, an alternative to taking wild fish, because we're taking too many wild fish and it's hurting the ocean. There are now 7 billion of us, and we do not photosynthesize ourselves. We cannot take sunlight and directly make energy. We have to eat something. We have choices, though. We can eat plants, most efficient use of sunlight to feed ourselves. Or we can eat animals that eat plants. That's the next most efficient way to do it, especially young ones. Makes no sense to eat a 50-year-old catfish. We should eat 1-year-old animals if we're going to consume animals at all. These are simple concepts that anyone can figure out. And as our numbers grow, and they are growing, we will have to become far more selective about what we can eat if we're going to continue to feed as many people, even as there are now, let alone as there will be if we follow the current trends on into the 21st century and beyond.
A new question. Amaseigarrena, número 16. Axular, bigarren hezkuntza, institutoa, Santurtzitik.
Las dos habéis basado vuestras investigaciones en nuestros adelantos. Las dos han basado sus investigaciones en nuevos adelantos tecnológicos. ¿Creen que la investigación está supeditada a la tecnología o a medida que se investiga van generando nueva tecnología que les permite proseguir con lo que están buscando?
Research can go in different ways. Mathematicians are just thinking, but they know to think, and they know to answer, to ask questions. Sometimes they even know to answer, or they know to show that there is no answer. Physicists, biologists, and chemists have to do experiments. And simple experiments have been done. You remember, I was climbing the desk, but I also, a little bit older I tried to see how fast water goes through a piece of wool wire compared to kerosene, to benzene. And this created a fire. I didn't tell you about this one. So at that time, at least I could do something very simple in order to study something, to understand something new. This simple type of experiments are usually described in books and also are done in the first years of studies. But science developed, and the questions are much more complicated and much more demanding, and some type of technology is needed. Some people are clever enough to use existing technology for important questions, but usually the need for accuracy and for deep understanding is driving better and better and better ways to identify it. And if you look at the last 20-25 years, most of the developments were depending on either new technologies or new ideas to use old technologies, and usually the combination between them. The very, very, very fascinating thing is the understanding of genome and of how to express genome, how to understand genetic diseases because of changes in the genome. All this couldn't be done on the old technologies. There the technologies are overwhelming. I think every year it's jumping up. And also my studies, when I started, except for crystallization that I told you, one of the main problems was there is no technology that you will be able to use. Nothing is accurate enough. Nothing is sensitive enough. This was developed in parallel, not exactly by me, part of it by me too, by my group, but it was developed because there was more and more need to answer this type of questions. So your question is correct, and the two answers you gave are also correct.
We couldn't know what we now know but for the development of technologies from telescopes to microscopes to submarines to aircraft to spacecraft. I think one of the transformative moments in history came in 1969 when that image of Earth from space came back to remind us that this is it. We can look far as we like. There is no place like home, this blue planet. It's technology that gave us that view. And it's the continuing development of new ways to look at the world. There is no substitute for the human brain. There is nothing that can do what the human mind is capable of doing. But we need those ways that only humans have been able to develop. It's the application of our minds that makes it possible to build an airplane, to build a spacecraft, to build a submarine, to build the kind of equipment that makes it possible to find a ribosome, for heaven's sakes, let alone to appreciate their meaning. This is a critical moment in history, something that I hope that you will really understand, that never before in history have human beings known what we now know, what you can discover just by being alive and being awake to the news, the information that you learn in school that is around us. You'll never know all there is to know, for heaven, that is known. None of us can achieve that, but the ability to synthesize the bits of information that have been gathered up till this time through the computer technologies that now exist, that didn't exist when I was a child. We're able to see patterns. We're able to make connections. We're able to put things together that our predecessors could not imagine. Just the capacity to understand the phenomenon of climate change. We didn't know. We didn't have enough information or the capacity to pull it all together. We did not have satellites in the sky or sensors down on the ground or sensors in the sea to gather the basic data that make it possible for us to pull these ideas together and to understand, again, those big questions. Who are we? What are we doing here? What is our future going to be like? Is there going to be a future? And if so, how do we get to wherever that future will be? This is a privileged time. Not only is it, as never before, have we understood our place in the universe as well as we now do. Never again will we have an opportunity, such as all of us now have, to try to take actions to protect the planet that keeps us alive. I love the conference that I've just been a part of, to hear the deliberations, the thoughts of these very learned people. It worries me to imagine that in 50 years, unless we take actions now, the ability for gatherings such as this to take place may be at risk, because the world may be in greater turmoil, because we fail to act on what we now know about how the planet is working. There are some big problems with water, fresh water and the ocean, big problems with respect to loss of the diversity of life. This year is celebrated as the year of biodiversity. For the past 10 years, scientists all over the world have been looking at the ocean, a census of marine life, trying to figure out how many of what kind of creatures live in the sea, and what do they mean to us who live here on the terrestrial parts of the planet. How does it all fit together? What we do know is that, and we know this really for the first time now, that it matters how we treat nature. We have abused the natural systems, contaminated the waters, eliminated the forests, and eliminated the diversity of life that keeps us alive. For the first time, we understand that we have to make peace with the natural world if we're going to make peace with ourselves. That's the big idea of our time. And every one of you can have a role in doing something really important, more important than any who have existed before this time, because for the first time, we're beginning to get it. We have to take care of the planet that takes care of us. We all have the potential for making history by being good ancestors for those who will follow.
Bueno, hemos agotado el tiempo, pero Pedro me ha dado permiso para sacar una preguntilla más. Entonces le voy a pedir a Vicente Zaragoza, que también nos ha acogido, que saque la última pregunta. Pregunta número 17. Y repite a Xular Bigarren Hezkuntza Institutua de Santurtzi. 2 números seguidos nos han salido. 17.
¿Cómo se puede hacer para hacer llegar todo esto en forma de divulgación seria cuando la gente joven tiene otras formas de comunicarse y no lee revistas o periódicos sobre estos temas? ¿Cómo se puede hacer para hacer llegar todo esto en forma de divulgación seria cuando la gente joven tiene otras formas de comunicarse y no lee revistas o periódicos sobre estos temas?
We'll tweet.
So why do you think only young people are not reading magazines? I consider myself not exactly young, although I'm not very old. But I'm using the internet the same way you do, and maybe even more. Reading a magazine is important, and it was important in my life before there was an internet. But now a lot of information is available electronically. There is nothing wrong with it. Communicating, you mean Facebook? Things like this? We can also put our scientific advances on that. This is not going to stop science. Actually, I think that a young person today, when I talk to a young person and I mention something, within very short time, I get a lot of information back from this young person. I know that not everything on the internet is completely correct, but also not everything in the written journals is completely correct. It's much easier to correct a page on the internet than to go back to 1957 paper and tell the students this was wrong or not accurate or whatever. I see no problem with that. I only see a problem if the young people use this information not for science. It's also not a problem, but for those that want to be scientists, they should use this for science. There is nothing wrong with electronic or what you call different ways. And I know that we old people are not supposed to use it, but we do. I'll show you. Ask him how many emails we had between us. And last night I wrote a really very long response to a question of the journal magazine Nature that you still can buy, but you can also read on the internet. I think this is not a problem in my eyes. The opposite, I think that people can communicate better, and people have to be clever enough to reject the stupid opinions or the stupid responses. But if you're not clever enough for that, you won't be here. Not today. So I see no problem with that.
I actually think that the new means of communicating provide maybe the best hope that we can actually secure an enduring place for ourselves going forward, because it's knowledge, again. How do you get it out there? Any way you can. You can sit down around a campfire and talk. You can sing. You can have musical performances. You can dance. You can communicate with smoke signals. You can communicate with books or magazines, or you can communicate by tweeting or whatever it is, but do it and find even more effective ways to convey what we now know, convey the way forward. I think that part of the reason that we are at this crucial place of understanding that we've got problems and that there are solutions is because in the last century, new means of communication became available. We don't have to wait for a letter to cross the Atlantic on a boat to get a message from one side of the world to the other. We can do it in an instant through the internet, and we need to be able to do that. So when I mentioned earlier, check out the current issue of Time magazine, or check out the current issue of the National Geographic. They're both online. You don't have to go to a newsstand. You can go to a computer and find the information. You can go to Google, for heaven's sakes, and get information about many of the questions that are of the sort that you're asking here today, like aquaculture. You can just become overwhelmed with the amount of information that is right there at your fingertips. And I love it. I love libraries. There's no substitute for a good book either that you can hold in your hand. I love even the smell and the feel of a good book. But we shouldn't say it's one thing or the other. We should embrace it all and use it all because we need it all.
About the smell of the books and the feel, now there is a new company that is doing electronic books with the smell of normal books. So you can have a little screen and smell what you like.
Antes de que Pedro haga un poco el resumen del encuentro y aprovechando un poco lo que surgió, invitaros a que hemos abierto un perfil en Facebook sobre este encuentro y quería invitaros a que que lo continuemos un poco en el tiempo con vuestras aportaciones, con vuestra evaluación del evento, qué os ha gustado, qué pensáis que para otra vez se puede mejorar. Se llama Aquarium topaketak, lo podéis buscar, sale inmediatamente si ponéis esas dos palabras que hablen en Facebook y os invito a hacer vuestras aportaciones.
Antes de terminar, aparte de agradecer, normalmente me toca a mí hacer el resumen de lo que se ha dicho aquí, pero se ha dicho tanto y tan bueno que yo no me considero capacitado para hacer este resumen. Sí quisiera tres pequeños puntos, ¿no? Hemos tenido unas jornadas, Silvia, antes de Passion for como parte esencial de Passion for Knowledge, pero antes de este asunto, que se ha llamado Passion for the Sea. I don't know whether you were informed of that. You were informed of that, yeah. It has been here in the Aquarium, organized by them, in collaboration with us, with conferences and marvelous videos that support entirely your views. So, Passion for the Sea, of course, there's no Nobel Prize for the sea, but if it would be, but I think you have enough, would be the heroine of the sea and the love of many people for the work that you have been doing. And also was very impressed by I like the answer by Ada and family and women, and we had some complaints because according to some laws the number of speakers, male like women, should be the same, but I think goes with her answer and her comment that we didn't choose these two wonderful ladies because they were women, but because they were excellent at world level. But of course that doesn't mean that women are treated equally. There is no by chance that Ada is the only Nobel Prize for chemistry alive. Not only the only Nobel Prize for chemistry in Israel. I think there were 3 before. Have been only 2 persons Nobel Prize for physics. Of course, and one of the most wonderful pictures, scientific pictures of the 20th century. For me, the most important scientific picture of the 20th century is the X-ray diffraction by Rosalind Franklin, which is the Rossena stout of light. No? When Watson saw that, he says, my mouth felt, and later, unfortunately, he didn't give Rosalind Franklin in the treatment of the book Double Helix. I think, and I am in that with good company in this opinion with Peter Medawar, he didn't treat Rosalind Franklin with the same moral status that he shown in his scientific work. But anyway, how can it be otherwise? Royal Society, 1667 was founded. First woman, 1949. The French Academy, also 1662 or 3, the first woman in 1979. The Basque have a sentence in the north of our country who said, liberté, equality, fraternité, horietatik bat egia balite. Y simplemente para acabar, en vez de resumir, yo resumiría con lo que han dicho las dos ponentes al principio. Leí un libro una vez, El fin de la ciencia, y yo me preguntaba, pero ¿cómo puede ser el fin de la ciencia si no sabemos ni siquiera dónde se coloca el agua en una superficie ordenada de rutenio? Y las dos ponentes nos han explicado que mientras haya curiosidad, habrá ciencia. Y nos han explicado hermosamente cómo realmente la ciencia avanza contestando a preguntas, pero creando nuevas preguntas en el proceso. Es como si hubiese una ley hada de conservación equivalente a la conservación de la energía, la ley de conservación de la ignorancia. Cada pregunta que se contesta crea dos nuevas. Bueno, ella ha dicho 15 o 150, igual la ley de entropía de la ignorancia. En resumen, yo creo que la conclusión, si yo tuviese que decirle a un periodista, ¿qué han dicho estas dos personas tan eminentes, aparte de mostrar conocimiento y pasión? Pues nos han dicho que el producto más importante del conocimiento es aumentar la ignorancia. El aumento de la ignorancia no es que aumente la ignorancia, pero la ignorancia pasa de ser inconsciente, no sabíamos a ser consciente. Y por estas maravillosas lecciones les damos las gracias a vosotros por vuestra asistencia, no sin antes recordaros que tenéis que ir al Cursal, porque la oportunidad de oír a Ada Yonath con el título ese maravilloso que tiene mañana today also because there are other wonderful speakers, but tomorrow, because after all we have learned, when I read these fantastic titles, the beers, now I begin to understand what is behind only a glimpse of your fantastic title. What is your title, Ada? Remain then. So after that we close and thank everybody, but she will be saying the title.
Before I say the title, who solved my problem? My question. Who has an answer? Except for those that I showed the answer. Okay, children, when they look at these numbers, if you write them, 1, 4, and 7 are only straight lines. 2, 6, 3, and 8, and 0 are also round. And children see it. It means what I'm trying to say is that each generation, each age has its own way of looking at life. And you're young, you still have a lot of future. Now, my title, I don't remember by heart, but it has to do with hibernating bears, Everests, unpaved roads, and ribosomes, and maybe also antibiotics. Bye-bye.